Every morning, she descended into the shadows of the city, carrying nothing but a worn guitar and a voice full of dreams. People passed her without a glance, lost in their own worlds. But one day, someone stopped, and what happened next would change her life forever, though she had no idea who was listening. The metro station was cold, its walls stained with the dust of 1,000 forgotten days. The smell of old tracks and concrete filled the air, but amidst the chaos of footsteps and announcements, a melody floated softly, like a fragile bird lost in a storm. It was her voice, pure, raw, honest. Her name was Emily. 23 years old, skin kissed by the sun, eyes full of unspoken dreams. She wasn't just singing for coins, she was singing to survive. Her guitar had only 5 strings, and her fingers were cracked from the cold, but each note came from a place deeper than most could understand. Every day, Emily positioned herself near the same pillar on the C-line platform of the New York subway. Her spot wasn't chosen for comfort or visibility. It was the only corner where the echoes didn't drown her out completely. Her voice carried stories of a mother she lost too soon, of a father who disappeared, and of a childhood spent moving from shelter to shelter. She sang because the silence was worse. Silence reminded her she was alone. The rush-hour crowd never noticed her pain. They rushed past her, suits, heels, sneakers, all of them looking at phones, thinking about meetings, ignoring the soul unraveling in front of them. Except for the old janitor named Miguel. He'd give her a smile sometimes, a nod. It meant more than he knew. One morning, she sang a song her mother used to hum while folding laundry. It wasn't famous, it didn't have a name. But as she sang, something shifted. Her voice cracked halfway through, not from the cold, but from emotion. She closed her eyes just for a second, letting the tears mix with the melody. That's when she felt it. A pause in the air, like someone was truly listening. She didn't dare look. People sometimes stopped, dropped $1, and left. But this was different. The stillness had weight. Someone wasn't just hearing. They were feeling. Emily's heart skipped a beat. When she finished, she opened her eyes. No one stood before her. The platform was as busy as always. But she felt it. Someone had been there, watching, listening, silently moved. She packed up her guitar slowly, not because she was tired, but because something inside her had changed. For the first time in weeks, she felt seen. Emily's apartment was barely more than a room with cracked walls and a leaking faucet. The heater hadn't worked in weeks, and the air inside was colder than the streets outside. Her bed was a second-hand mattress on the floor, shared with a pile of old blankets she'd collected over the years. Each one told a story of a different winter, and a different night she thought she wouldn't make it. The money she earned from singing barely covered food. Some days she skipped dinner so she could afford a subway fare the next morning. Her life was a fragile balance of hope and hunger. Yet, every morning she forced herself to go back down to the subway and sing, because if she didn't, who would hear her? Who would remember she existed? Her childhood was a blur of foster homes, missed birthdays, and unanswered prayers. She remembered the smell of burnt toast and the sound of a woman crying in the next room. No lullabies, no bedtime stories. Just the cold whisper of abandonment that stayed with her into adulthood. Music was her escape. Her mother had sung when she was alive, softly while cooking or brushing Emily's hair. Those melodies were the only pieces of her past that hadn't been stolen by time. Emily clung to them like lifelines, turning memory into melody, pain into harmony. One evening, after a long day of singing and only a few coins in her cup, Emily found herself staring at the ceiling of her apartment, tears sliding down the sides of her face into the folds of her pillow. Her stomach growled, but she ignored it. She was too tired to cry out loud, too tired to scream. So she hummed, a soft tune, almost like a lullaby. The next morning, she looked in the mirror and barely recognized the girl staring back. Her cheeks were thinner, her eyes sunken. But behind them, something still burned. Stubbornness. She couldn't give up. Not yet. When she returned to the metro that day, the platform was busier than usual. She took her usual spot and began singing. Her voice cracked more than usual, her throat dry. Still, she sang with everything she had. And again she felt it. That invisible presence, that stillness in the chaos. What she didn't know was that just beyond the crowd, someone had been watching her for weeks. Not with pity, but with fascination. A man in a long coat, always standing far enough to blend in, yet close enough to hear every word she sang. She never noticed him. Not yet. She was too lost in her fight to survive. But the man, he noticed everything. The station pulsed with life, but to Emily it all blurred together. A grey tide of faces and footsteps. People came and went, chasing deadlines and lost thoughts. She was just another sound in the background to most, but not to him. He stood by the pillar near the vending machine, always the same spot, always at the same time. At first, Emily thought it was coincidence, just another commuter with tired eyes and a scarf pulled too tight around his neck, but he kept coming back. He didn't speak. He never dropped coins. He just watched. His name was Daniel, though Emily didn't know it yet. In his mid-40s, he wore tailored clothes and shoes that had never touched dirt. His hair was neatly combed, his eyes calm but intense. He looked out of place in the dirty subway station, like a businessman who had taken a wrong turn. Yet he kept returning. Daniel wasn't there for the train. He first heard her by accident, during a layover between meetings. The sound of her voice stopped him mid-step. It wasn't perfect, not polished or commercial, but it had something most artists lacked: truth. Her voice trembled, not because of technique, but because it carried the weight of real pain. That haunted him. He found himself coming back. He told no one, not his assistant, not his driver. He made excuses to stop at that station just to hear her sing again. Every time, he stood farther back, hidden among the crowd, not wanting to disturb the raw honesty of her performance. Emily felt him before she saw him. A stillness, an energy. Like being watched without fear, only curiosity. She told herself it was her imagination, just another face in the crowd, but her instincts whispered otherwise. Sometimes when she sang certain songs, the ones that really hurt, she swore she could feel a shift in the air, as if her pain reached someone, as if it mattered. One morning she paused mid-song. Something was different. The man wasn't in his usual spot. Her eyes scanned the crowd quickly, faster than she meant to, but he was gone. Her stomach sank, and she hated herself for caring. She didn't know his name, his story, or his intentions. But in a world that ignored her, his presence had become oddly comforting. And now, his absence felt like silence. But she wasn't the only one who noticed. Miguel, the janitor, approached her quietly that evening. "He watches you sing," he said with a small nod. "That man, he's not like the others." Emily's heart raced. "You've seen him too?" Miguel only nodded and walked away, leaving her with more questions than answers. Daniel returned the next morning, as if he had never been gone. But something had changed. He stood closer this time, not enough to alarm her, but close enough to be noticed. Emily felt her breath hitch when she saw him, sharply dressed, calm, unreadable. Still, he said nothing. She tried to ignore him, but it was impossible. Her fingers trembled on the guitar strings. Her voice, usually steady despite the cold, quivered with the weight of awareness. Who was this man? Why did he keep coming back? And why wouldn't he say a single word? Daniel kept his distance, careful not to break the invisible barrier between them. He knew too well what fear looked like. He'd seen it in boardrooms, in negotiations, in his own reflection. The last thing he wanted was to scare her off. So he stayed quiet, observing, listening. He had money, more than he knew what to do with. But there was something about that girl. Her voice reminded him of a time before the suits, before the pressure. A time when music had meant something real. His mother used to sing to him too, long before she lost her battle with cancer. Emily's voice carried the same tenderness, the same strength. Emily noticed the others on the platform no longer stared past her. They stared at him. A man like that didn't belong in this setting. His presence gave her performance a strange new energy. More passengers began to stop, not because of her voice, but because they were curious about him. Who was he watching? She hated that part. She didn't want attention out of pity or mystery. She wanted people to hear her, really hear her, like he did. One night, as she packed up her things, she found something odd in her guitar case, a napkin, folded once, clean, with sharp corners, no money, no name. Just a single handwritten line, "You have something the world needs." Her chest tightened. It wasn't signed. She looked around, but the platform was almost empty. Had it been him? She didn't know. The next day, she almost didn't go back. The idea of being watched, evaluated, judged, it made her sick with anxiety. But she had no choice. The rent was due in 3 days, and she had barely enough for food. She had to sing. She had to survive. And so, she returned. To the same pillar, the same cold concrete floor, but when she arrived, he was already there, waiting, still silent. Still watching, still listening. Emily's songs weren't just music, they were confessions. Each lyric, each trembling note was a memory stitched with hope and heartache. She never trained her voice in a school. Life was her only teacher, pain was her piano, and loss was her metronome. That morning, as Daniel stood nearby in silence, Emily sang a song she hadn't dared to sing in months. It was her mother's favorite, a gentle ballad about finding light in the darkness. Her mother used to hum it while folding laundry, cooking dinner, even while brushing Emily's hair. Those were the only moments in her childhood that felt like safety. Her voice cracked on the second verse. The pain was too real, but she didn't stop. She pushed through it, each word heavier than the last, until the melody wrapped around the station like a soft blanket. Even the commuters slowed down, conversations quieted. Something was happening, something sacred. Daniel felt a lump rise in his throat. He had heard opera singers, gospel choirs, stars with Grammys, but none of them touched him the way she did. This girl, standing in boots with holes and a coat 2 sizes too big, held more truth in her voice than anyone he'd ever met. When the song ended, a silence lingered longer than usual. A few people clapped, hesitantly. Most just moved on, unsure of what they had just experienced. But Daniel didn't move, not even an inch. Emily looked up and met his eyes for the first time. A full look, not just a glance. And in that moment she saw something in him she didn't expect. Not pity, not curiosity, but recognition. Like he knew that pain, like he carried some of it too. That scared her more than anything. She packed up quickly and left before he could approach. Her heart raced as she walked to the surface, lungs burning with cold air and confusion. Why did this man unsettle her so deeply? Why did it feel like her soul had been touched by his silence? That night, she sat in her apartment staring at the napkin again. "You have something the world needs." It played over and over in her mind, like a chorus stuck on repeat. No one had ever said anything like that to her, not teachers, not foster parents, not anyone. She didn't sleep. Her thoughts spun too wildly, not just about him, but about what he might see in her. What she might not yet see in herself. And the question that haunted her most: what if he was right? The following morning, the city woke under a heavy sky. Rain tapped against rooftops and windows like a warning. Wind howled between the buildings, pushing people faster through the streets. Emily wrapped her coat tighter around her thin frame and stepped out into the storm. She almost didn't go. Her throat ached. Her boots were soaked through before she reached the subway entrance. The wind cut through her clothes like glass. But she went anyway, because the music inside her didn't care about the weather. Because hope, no matter how fragile, pushed her forward. The station was colder than usual. The kind of cold that numbed her fingertips and made her guitar sound brittle. She took her place under the flickering light, brushing wet strands of hair from her face. Only a few people were around. Most avoided public transit on days like this. But he was there. Daniel stood, just as always, his coat buttoned high, his umbrella dripping at his side. His presence lit a strange fire in her chest, part fear, part comfort, and something else she didn't want to name. She nodded at him without thinking, a gesture so small yet louder than any word they had ever shared. She began to sing. Her voice was softer this time, not because she lacked strength, but because the rain called for gentleness. It was a lullaby to the city, a hymn for the weary, a whispered prayer for something more. Her fingers stung with every chord. Her lips trembled as the cold bit into her bones. She had nothing left to give, and still she sang, because the music wasn't about being heard anymore. It was about surviving. As her final note faded into silence, Daniel stepped forward for the first time. Emily's breath caught. She didn't move, didn't speak. He reached into his coat and pulled something out, a thermos. Without a word, he placed it gently beside her guitar case and stepped back. No smile, no explanation, just a simple act of warmth. She looked at the thermos, then up at him. Their eyes met, not for long, but long enough. Then he turned and disappeared into the moving crowd. Inside the thermos was coffee, hot, strong, exactly how she liked it, though she never told anyone. That night, as she sat in her small apartment wrapped in layers, she sipped from that same thermos and cried. Not because of the rain, not because of the cold, but because for the first time in a long while, someone had seen her. The days passed, each one colder than the last. Winter had wrapped its arms around the city, but Emily kept showing up. Her songs became softer, more intimate, like whispered secrets passed between strangers. And still, Daniel came, always quiet, always near. It became a routine neither of them acknowledged, a silent rhythm between her voice and his presence. She never asked why he came. He never offered a reason. But there were signs, subtle, quiet signs, that something was shifting. One morning there was a folded scarf resting beside her guitar before she arrived. No note, no explanation, just soft, worn fabric that still held the warmth of someone else's kindness. She touched it with trembling fingers and looked around. He was already there, standing in his usual spot, pretending not to watch her reaction. Emily wrapped the scarf around her neck before she sang that day. Her voice carried a new kind of heat, not from strength, but from being cared for. It changed everything. Miguel noticed. "You have a guardian now," the janitor said with a crooked smile as he swept the platform near her. Emily blushed, brushing it off. "He's just kind," Miguel chuckled. "Kind doesn't show up every day in the freezing cold with coffee and scarves, mija." She didn't respond. What could she say? That she thought about him more than she should? That when she closed her eyes to sing, she imagined he was the only one listening? Daniel, meanwhile, remained a ghost in plain sight. He took no photos, spoke to no one. He didn't even carry a phone. But he watched her with a hunger in his eyes. Not a physical one, but the kind born from emptiness. Like he saw something in her that filled a space inside himself he thought was lost forever. And she began to see the signs too, the way he leaned slightly closer during certain songs, the way he nodded along, barely perceptible, the rare, fleeting smile that touched his lips during her final notes. They were signs no one else saw, because no one else was looking close enough. But Emily saw them, and it terrified her, because the last time someone got that close, they walked away. It was a Monday, quiet, grey, the kind of morning where even the city's heartbeat seemed to slow. Emily arrived at the platform a little later than usual. Her ankle had twisted slightly the day before, and every step brought a dull ache. Still, she limped her way to the usual spot, clutching her guitar like it was an extension of her own body. Daniel wasn't there. She tried to ignore the hollow feeling that crept into her chest. Maybe he was busy. Maybe he had finally moved on. People did that. People always left. She set her things down and began to play, but her voice lacked its usual warmth. Without him there, without his quiet presence anchoring her, the songs felt incomplete. She forced herself through 2 sets, the melody dry on her lips. Then she saw it. Tucked beneath one of the dollar bills in her guitar case was a crumpled envelope. Her fingers hesitated before reaching for it. It was old-looking, not fresh. The corners were bent, the paper soft from handling. But it had her name on it, just Emily, nothing else. She opened it slowly. Inside was a note written in tidy, deliberate handwriting. "You're more than a voice in the shadows. Meet me. 3 p.m. Cafe Roosevelt on 5th. I'll be in the corner booth." No name, no signature. Her hand shook as she read it again and again. It had to be him. No one else knew her well enough. No one else would say something like that. But her stomach twisted in knots. This wasn't just coffee. This was a shift in the story she was barely starting to believe in. Miguel saw her staring at the note and raised an eyebrow. "You okay?" Emily folded it and tucked it deep into her coat pocket. "I don't know." The hours passed like molasses. She sang again, but her mind wasn't on the music. Her voice drifted, mechanical, and when the time came, she packed up quickly and climbed the steps out of the subway, her heart pounding like a drum in her chest. Cafe Roosevelt wasn't far. A small, quiet place with soft jazz playing from old speakers and a bell that chimed when the door opened. She stepped inside. The warm air hit her skin and melted the cold off her bones. And there he was, Daniel, sitting in the far corner, a steaming cup in front of him. Eyes locked on her the moment she walked through the door. He stood slowly, not with arrogance, but reverence, like she was someone worth waiting for. Emily froze, because now there were no more shadows to hide behind. For a moment, the world paused. The bell above the cafe door stopped ringing, the chatter faded, and all Emily could hear was the pounding in her ears. Her boots were wet from the slush outside, and her coat was heavy with nerves. But somehow, she walked forward. Daniel stood as she approached, unsure whether to offer his hand or a seat. He did neither. He just looked at her, really looked, like a man seeing color for the first time. "You came," he said softly, his voice richer than she expected. She nodded, sliding into the booth across from him. Her fingers trembled as they rested on the table. "You left the note?" He didn't answer right away. He reached into his coat, pulled out a small cloth and placed it gently on the table. Inside was the same crumpled napkin she'd kept in her apartment, the one with the words, "You have something the world needs." Emily stared at it, then at him. "Why me?" Daniel took a breath. Because when you sing, everything else stops. You don't just carry pain, you transform it. You remind people they're not alone. She didn't know what to say. No one had ever spoken to her like that. Like she was more than her struggles, more than her voice, like she mattered. He leaned forward. I've seen talent in concert halls, Broadway, studios, but none of them shook me like you did. Not one. Emily swallowed hard. Her voice, usually so strong in the subway, caught in her throat. I don't know anything about the industry. I don't even know how to read music. I don't care, Daniel said quickly. You don't need polish, you need opportunity, and I can give you that. His words should have felt like a dream, but to Emily, they felt like a trap. Too good, too sudden, too impossible. Why? She whispered. Daniel looked down at his coffee, then back at her. Because someone gave me a chance once, and it changed everything. Now it's my turn to do the same, and I choose you. The cafe around them returned to life. Dishes clinking, spoons stirring, doors opening. But for Emily, time stood still. She could feel the door opening. Not just the one they sat beside, but one inside her. The kind that doesn't open often, the kind that leads to something new. But with it came fear, because open doors mean stepping through, and stepping through means never being the same again. The cafe emptied slowly as the sun dipped behind the city's skyline, casting long shadows across the booth where Emily and Daniel sat. The warmth of the place clung to her skin, but inside, she felt the chill of something deeper, uncertainty. You said someone gave you a chance, she began, her voice cautious. What kind of chance? Daniel leaned back, exhaling like the question had been waiting for years. I wasn't always wearing suits. I didn't grow up in penthouses or ride in black cars. I was raised by a single mum in Queens. She worked nights cleaning office buildings. I watched her break herself to keep our lights on. Emily blinked, surprised. The image of him, sharp, polished, untouchable, didn't match the story unraveling in front of her. I had a voice once too, he continued, tapping his chest gently. I sang in a church choir. My mom used to say I had a voice that could heal people, but I never believed her. Not until someone saw me. A woman named Rachel. She gave me a shot at recording background vocals for a gospel artist. I was 17. He paused, eyes growing distant. That one opportunity led to everything. I built a life from it. Started working behind the scenes, became a producer, built a label. Then, somewhere along the way, I stopped listening to music the way I used to, until I heard you. Emily's heart thudded. So you're in the industry? She asked. I own one of the biggest independent music companies in New York, Daniel replied. But none of that matters, Emily. I don't want to change you. I just want people to hear you like I have. She looked away, overwhelmed. I'm not sure I'm ready, she admitted. I'm not like the others. I don't have the look. I don't have... You have the truth, he interrupted. And that's more rare than talent. The room was quiet for a moment. Just the hum of the heater and the low murmur of distant conversations. Daniel reached into his coat and slid a small card across the table. On it was his name, a company logo, and a phone number. I'm not asking you to say yes now, he said gently. I'm just asking you not to say no forever. Emily stared at the card. The truth had been revealed, not just about him, but about what might be possible. Emily stood outside the cafe long after Daniel had gone, the business card still pressed between her fingers like it might dissolve if she let go. The wind whipped her hair across her face and snow began to fall. Slow, silent flakes that melted as they touched her skin. She didn't go home right away. Instead, she walked the streets with the city buzzing around her, heart caught between fear and fire. The words Daniel had spoken played in her mind over and over, each time digging a little deeper. I'm not asking you to say yes now, just not to say no forever. For most of her life, choices had been taken from her, by circumstance, by poverty, by people who promised things and never came back. But now, for the first time, she had a real choice, to step forward or stay hidden. The next morning, she returned to the subway. Her usual corner felt smaller now. She strummed her guitar slowly, the strings sounding almost foreign to her. The station was filled with its usual ghosts, busy people, rushing feet, distant glances. But it didn't feel the same. She realized something terrifying. She had outgrown this place. It wasn't about ego. It wasn't about fame. It was about truth, her truth. And that truth was calling her somewhere else. She finished her last song and sat down against the pillar, hugging the scarf Daniel had once left. Miguel passed by with his broom and gave her a knowing look. "You thinking about saying yes?" he asked casually, without stopping. Emily didn't answer. She just stared at her guitar, then at the card still tucked in her coat. That evening, she went to the small rooftop of her building, the only place she could see the skyline clearly. She sat there for hours, her guitar resting on her knees, playing melodies no one else could hear. And then, quietly, she made her decision. Not with a dramatic cry, not with a sweeping gesture, just a whisper to the wind. It's time. 2 weeks later, the platform on the sea line felt different. Emily returned not to sing, but to say goodbye. She stood quietly by the pillar, her guitar case in hand, not open for coins, but latched tight, polished, ready for the world beyond this underground stage. Miguel spotted her immediately. "No guitar today?" he asked, raising an eyebrow. "I'm not singing here anymore," she said, her voice calm, steady. "It's time I sing for more than echoes and footsteps." He nodded slowly, like he'd been waiting for this moment even longer than she had. "Go make 'em listen." Later that afternoon, Emily walked through the tall glass doors of a building she'd never imagined entering. Inside, she was met with warmth, instruments, soundboards, voices. But she didn't feel small. She felt seen. Daniel was waiting. He didn't wear a suit this time. Just jeans and a soft grey sweater. Still the same calm eyes. But today they held something more. Pride. "You showed up," he said with a smile. "I almost didn't," she admitted, laughing nervously. "But then I remembered who I was singing for, and it's not just for me anymore." They worked for hours. He didn't rush her. He didn't try to shape her into something she wasn't. He simply listened. And she, for the first time in her life, sang without fear. The first track she recorded was the song her mother used to sing, raw, stripped down, honest. Daniel stood behind the glass, eyes glistening. A few months later, that same song was uploaded online. No flashy video, no auto-tune, just a girl with a story and a voice like healing rain. Within days, it went viral. People all over the country shared it. Strangers in buses, mothers in kitchens, truckers on highways. Messages poured in. "This saved me. I haven't cried like this in years. Who is she?" She didn't change her name. She didn't try to be someone else. Emily stayed Emily. And Daniel, he never took $1 from her music, not a single cent. He only asked for one thing, that she keep singing the truth. Years later, when Emily stood on a stage in front of thousands, she looked out into the crowd and saw one familiar face in the front row. Grayer, quieter, but still watching. The man who listened when no one else did. And with tears in her eyes, she sang the same melody that once echoed through the subway where it had all begun. Have you ever felt like no one was listening, that your voice didn't matter? Emily's story reminds us that even in the darkest corners, someone might be hearing your song, someone who sees what the rest of the world ignores. If this story touched your heart, leave a comment below and tell us, what would you do if someone finally saw your true worth? Or, Have you ever had a silent angel appear in your life when you needed it most? We want to hear your story. And if you'd like to support more stories like this, consider leaving a super thanks. Your financial help allows this channel to reach more people and continue sharing powerful, real-life inspired stories that give us hope, tears, and maybe even a second chance. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a new story. We have many more tales that will move your heart and maybe even change the way you see the world. And now, click the video that's on your screen right now and watch another story that will leave you speechless.